They rejected her application. No interview follow-up, no second chance. Just a resume tossed like trash. And then the file on the desk read, Classified Tier 1 Medical Officer. Here's the question that should scare you a little. How many people have you judged by a gap? A mistake, a not good enough label, without realizing what they survived to be standing in front of you. Picture a rainy Denver afternoon. Fluorescent lights. A waiting room that smells like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Your phone buzzing with bills, your stomach tight with hope you can't afford. Ellie Mercer sits across from a man who believes credentials are character, while she's trying to pretend her hands never learned a surgery in the dark. Stay to the end, and you'll learn what competence looks like when the world stops being polite. Before we begin, hit like and tell me what city you're watching from. That folder sat on Dr. Everett Clay's desk like a headstone. But Ellie Mercer was already gone, swallowed by the elevators and the polished hush of Front Range Memorial. The building kept breathing without her vents whispering, lights humming, administrators gliding down carpeted hallways as if nothing in the world could ever bleed on marble. Earlier that day, Denver wore rain like a bruise. The Uber idled at the curb while Ellie watched the hospital rise out of the wet street. Glass and steel bright banners on the facade, donor names etched into stone. The kind of place that sold hope with valet parking. She stepped out with one hand on her purse, not for balance, but out of habit. Her fingers found the strap, tested its weight, confirmed what was inside without looking. A security guard nodded at her as she crossed the plaza. He was tall, broad-bored. His eyes slid over her blazer, her low heels, her neat hair, and moved on. Ellie did not blame him. She had learned long ago how to look like she belonged nowhere important. The revolving doors breathed her in. Inside, the air was warmed and filtered and scented with something expensive that tried too hard to be clean. A fountain murmured in the atrium. People spoke softly as if they were visiting a museum instead of a hospital. Ellie's gaze flicked automatically to exits cameras' corners. She caught herself and forced her eyes back to center like a woman practicing normal. Her reflection moved in the glass wall beside the elevators. 34 slender shoulders held 2 square. The scar at her hairline was mostly hidden, but in harsh light it caught the eye, a pale seam that looked like it had been stitched by someone in a hurry. Her face could pass as calm. Her eyes could not. They carried a tiredness that didn't belong in daylight. She approached the reception desk. A young man with perfect teeth and a badge that said Kevin typed without looking up. "I have an interview," Ellie said. "Dr. Everett Clay, 2 o'clock. Kevin's fingers kept moving. Name, Ellie Mercer. He glanced up, blinked, then looked back down as if her face was not worth storing. "Take a seat. He's running late." Ellie thanked him. Her voice came out soft, polite civilian. She chose a chair against a wall with a clear view of the corridor. She did it without thinking. When she realized what she had done, she pretended it was about comfort. People passed in white coats. A woman pushed a stroller with an oxygen tank. A man in scrubs argued into his phone about a shift swap. Somewhere deeper in the building, a code alarm chimed and died. Life kept happening in small, private emergencies. Ellie waited. Her phone rested face down on her knee. No notifications, no social media, no distractions. She had deleted most of her old life in the months after she stopped taking calls. She had kept only what a normal person needed: a bank app, a grocery store login, a weather app she never trusted, a calculator icon that was not a calculator. She kept her hands still. She kept her breathing slow. 45 minutes passed. Kevin called her name like he was calling a number at the DMV. "This way," he said, already turning. Ellie followed him down a corridor that shifted from public shine to clinical efficiency. The smell changed. Less perfume, more disinfectant. The walls were painted a comforting beige that somehow made everything look tired. Kevin stopped outside a frosted glass door. "Go on," he said. Ellie knocked once, then entered. Dr. Everett Clay's office looked like the office of a man who collected proof of himself. Diplomas framed in dark wood, certificates, a photo with the governor, another with a sports team, a small trophy that said "Top Doctor" as if healing required an audience. Clay stood behind his desk in an expensive suit that fit like armor. He did not offer his hand. He did not offer a seat. He held her resume in both hands and studied it like it had offended him. Ellie waited. She had been briefed in worse rooms by men who did not bother with furniture, but this kind of cold was different. This was ego dressed as professionalism. Clay looked up at last. His eyes were pale and sharp, the color of winter sunlight. They held no warmth, only appraisal. "Miss Mercer," he said, "do you understand how competitive this institution is?" "Yes, doctor. Front Range is ranked among the top trauma centers in the region. We draw talent from Johns Hopkins, from UCSF, from Mass General. We do not hire people who drift." Ellie kept her face steady. She had learned to keep her expressions locked down in places where a smile could get someone killed. "I'm not a drifter," she said. Clay tapped her resume with a pen. Red ink, a color meant for correction. "I'm looking at your education," he said. "State University. Fine, serviceable. 2 years at a county hospital, fine for entry level, and then—" He paused, letting silence do the damage. And then nothing. Ellie felt something tighten behind her ribs. Not fear, not anger. Something older, a reflex that wanted to stand at attention and report "sir" with a clarity that would turn this whole conversation into a debrief. She did not. She lifted her chin a fraction. "I was working abroad." "Working abroad?" Clay repeated as if he were tasting the lie. "As what? A travel nurse? Volunteer medicine? Mission work? Contract work?" Clay's mouth curved into a small, cruel smile. "Let me translate. You took time off. You went to find yourself. It wasn't a vacation." Clay's gaze flicked to her shoes, her blazer, her hair. He was searching for a crack for evidence of irresponsibility. He found none, and seemed annoyed by that too. "Nursing is perishable," he said. "Medicine advances every day. Protocols change, machines change. You disappear for 7 years, and you expect to walk into my ER and lead a team." Ellie's throat was dry. She had spoken less and done more in rooms where men were dying, but this was the first time in a long time she felt the pressure of wanting something and being judged unworthy of it. "I adapt quickly," she said. "We do not have time for you to adapt," Clay replied. "I need a nurse lead who has been in the trenches." Ellie's lips pressed together. The word "trenches" hit her like a slap. It was a word civilians used when they wanted to borrow war without paying for it. Clay set her resume on the desk, then picked it up again, holding it over the trash can beside him like a demonstration. "I suggest you try urgent care," he said. "Flu shots, sprained ankles. That seems more your speed." Ellie watched the paper hover. In another life, her hands had been inside a chest cavity, fingers slick with blood, holding pressure on an artery while a helicopter shook around her. In another life, she had listened to a 19-year-old call for his mother with half a lung. In another life, she had decided who lived and who did not, because there were only so many hands and only so much time. But none of that existed on paper. Clay let the resume fall. It fluttered into the bin like a dead bird. "Is that your final decision?" Ellie asked, voice still even. Clay straightened his cuffs. He turned slightly toward the window as if his reflection mattered more than her. "It is," he said. "Close the door on your way out." Ellie stood still for a beat, letting the humiliation settle without letting it show. She could have told him about the cargo plane, about the heat and the screaming, about stitching tissue together while the world shook. She could have told him about the protocols. She had helped write the ones that never made it into public databases because they were designed for people whose names never appeared on charts. She could have told him her employer had been the United States government, and her patients had been both anonymous and untouchable. She did not because she was afraid of him, because she had promised herself she would stop living like that. "Thank you for your time," Ellie said. She walked out. She closed the door gently. In the hallway, her hands trembled, once barely visible, then stilled. She pressed her palm against her thigh and kept moving. The elevator ride down was quiet. A woman in scrubs stood beside her, scrolling through a phone, laughing softly at something Ellie could not hear. Ellie stared at the floor number lights and felt strangely hollow, like a room after everyone leaves. In the lobby, the rain was still falling. She walked 3 blocks without realizing she was counting. Each intersection was a checkpoint. Each storefront window a mirror. Each alley a possibility she refused to name. She found the diner because it looked like the kind of place that did not ask questions. A narrow sign. A bell on the door. Smudged glass. The smell hit her as soon as she stepped inside bacon grease and old coffee and something sweet that had burned. It reminded her of midnight mess halls and metal trays, the kind of comfort you got only when you were too exhausted to feel anything else. She chose a booth in the back, facing the entrance. She sat with her back to the wall. She told herself it was because she liked the corner. A waitress with a tired face and a voice like gravel approached with a pot. "You want coffee?" she said, not asking. "Yes," Ellie replied. The waitress poured black coffee into a thick mug that had survived too many drops. Her name tag read Tanya. "You look like somebody just kicked your dog," Tanya said. Ellie almost smiled. "Almost." "Interview," Ellie said. Tanya snorted. "They ever go good?" Ellie took a sip and let the heat bite her tongue. Pain that small was manageable. It was honest. "He said I wasn't qualified," Ellie said. Tanya raised an eyebrow. "What were you applying for?" "Surgeon General." "ER nurse lead." Tanya's laugh was short and sharp. "That's rich." Ellie stared at the coffee. She could see her own reflection in the surface, distorted by steam. A woman trying to look ordinary. A woman who had failed at being ordinary before she even started. "They didn't like my resume," Ellie said. Tanya leaned her hip against the booth like she had time. "Honey, people don't like a lot of things. My cousin lied on his resume, said he knew how to fix HVAC. Now he owns a company. Fake it till you make it." Ellie's fingers tightened around the mug. "I'm done faking," she murmured. Tanya's gaze softened in a way Ellie did not expect. "Then don't fake," she said. "Just be whatever you are." Ellie looked away. Whatever she was, it had a body count. Her phone buzzed against the tabletop. She flipped it over. The icon on the screen was a calculator. The interface was a calculator. But the notification line was not. Status. Ellie stared at it for a second, then unlocked the app with a sequence of taps that looked like math. A chat window opened plain and unmarked. Unknown contact status. Ellie typed with her thumbs held low, shielding the screen out of instinct. Rejected. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Unknown contact confirm. Ellie exhaled slowly. Confirm, he trashed it. A pause. Unknown contact, I can make a call. Ellie pictured the call. A voice in a secure office. A favor owed. A board member suddenly interested. An HR director suddenly apologetic. A signature appearing where it had been withheld. A life reopened like a door. She felt the temptation like hunger. Then she thought of the silence she had begged for. She thought of sleeping through the night without waking to phantom radio chatter. She thought of her hands not smelling like antiseptic and copper. "No favors," she typed. "Clean break." The reply came fast. "Unknown contact, you do not get clean breaks." Ellie's jaw tightened. She stared at the words until they blurred. She typed back slower this time. "I am a civilian." The dots appeared again. "Unknown contact, you are unarmed. That is different." Ellie's eyes flicked to the door. A man walked in wearing a wet jacket and shaking rain off his hair. He glanced around, chose a seat, opened a newspaper. Normal? Boring. Safe. Ellie wanted that kind of life so badly it made her angry. She typed, "I want health insurance, a paycheck, quiet." The response took longer. "Unknown contact." Quiet is not a place. It is a moment. You know that. Ellie's throat tightened. She hated how the contact wrote like they knew her. She hated that they did. She typed one word, "Stop." The phone buzzed again. Unknown, contact Seraph. Ellie stared at the code name until her vision sharpened into anger. Do not call me that. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, unknown, contact OK Ellie. Tanya returned, topping off the mug. Friend, Tanya asked. Ellie kept her face neutral, something like that. Tanya nodded as if she understood more than she should. You want pie, she said. On the house. You look like you're running on fumes. Ellie should have refused. She did not know how to accept kindness without suspicion. But her stomach ached with emptiness that was not just hunger. Okay, she said quietly. When Tanya walked away, Ellie sat still and listened. The diner had its own rhythm. Forks on plates. A kid whining. The low murmur of a sports channel on a mounted television. Outside, rain tapped against the window like fingers. Ellie tried to make her breathing match it. In her mind, she replayed Clay's voice, the contempt, the certainty, the way he had said trenches like it was his. She imagined her father's face if she went back home and told him she had failed again. She imagined the hardware store smell oil and lumber, the small town quiet that might actually be real. She imagined stacking boxes and ringing up customers and pretending her hands had never done anything else. The thought brought relief. It also brought a strange kind of shame. Her phone lay silent now. The handler had stopped pushing or had decided pushing was unnecessary. Either way, Ellie felt the pressure of the unseen world like a weather front. Tanya slid a slice of pie onto the table. Cherry. The crust was uneven, the kind of uneven that meant a human hand made it. Eat, Tanya said. Ellie picked up the fork. Her hand was steady. It had learned steadiness in places where shaking meant death. She took a bite. Sugar hit her tongue, bright and sharp. It almost made her eyes sting. Tanya watched her for a second, then spoke softer. So, what now, she asked. Ellie stared at the pie like it was a puzzle. I don't know, she said. Tanya shrugged. That's a start, she said, and walked away. Ellie ate slowly. Not because she wanted to savor it, but because she was practicing being in a room without scanning it every second. She made herself look out the window and watch cars pass headlights smearing through rain. She noticed details she normally would have ignored. A couple arguing under an umbrella. A delivery driver jogging to a door. A bus stopping at a light, passenger's silhouettes in the glow. Ordinary life running on a schedule that did not care who she was. For a few minutes, the noise in her head softened. It was never truly quiet. It just became distant like a radio turned down low. She finished the pie. She wiped her hands with a paper napkin. Her blazer sleeve had a small fray at the cuff she had not noticed before. She stared at it, annoyed by the proof that time had passed. Her phone buzzed once more. She did not look at it right away. When she did, the message was short. Unknown, contact, check, you're 6. Ellie's body reacted before her mind did. Her spine straightened. Her gaze slid to the window, to the reflection, to the door, to the mirrored chrome of the napkin dispenser. She saw movement behind her, a figure outside across the street, standing under an awning. A man. Dark jacket. Hands in pockets. Not smoking. Not talking. Not doing anything. Just watching. Ellie forced herself not to turn quickly. She made her movements slow and human. She lifted her mug and took another sip of coffee even though it had gone lukewarm. Her heart rate did not spike. It simply settled into a familiar calm, the kind that frightened doctors and comforted soldiers. She typed with her phone low beneath the table. Who is that? The reply came. Unknown, contact not mine. Ellie's jaw tightened. Then whose? No answer. Outside, the man shifted his weight slightly. He looked away for a moment as if checking traffic. Then his gaze returned. Ellie's mind moved through possibilities. Federal, private, a journalist, a bored cop, a random stranger with nowhere to be. She dismissed half of them instantly. The way he stood was wrong. Balanced, ready. Ellie set her mug down. Her fingers touched the strap of her purse again. She felt the shape inside familiar as a prayer. She did not open it. Not in public. Not unless she had to. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown, contact leave. Ellie stood. Tanya was at the counter. Ellie walked up, placed cash down more than enough. Tanya glanced at it, then at Ellie's face. "You okay?" Tanya asked. Ellie nodded once, not convincing, honest. "Thanks for the pie," Ellie said. Tanya's eyes narrowed, reading the tension in Ellie's posture like an old skill. "You want me to call someone?" she asked. Ellie shook her head. "No," she said. "Just keep the coffee hot." Tanya's mouth tightened. "Yeah," she said softly. "You do what you gotta do." Ellie pushed the door open. Rain met her like cold hands. The man across the street looked away at the exact moment she stepped out, as if he had been waiting for that cue. Ellie walked in the opposite direction without changing pace. She did not run. Running drew attention. She moved like someone with errands. She reached the corner and glanced at the reflection in a storefront window. The man was still there, but now he was moving too, crossing the street at a diagonal keeping distance. Ellie felt a flicker of something that might have been fear, or might have been anger that she could not have one normal day without shadows creeping back in. She kept walking. Denver stretched ahead. Wet, asphalt traffic hissing through puddles, the distant silhouette of Front Range Memorial rising above lower buildings. The hospital cranes loomed like ribs against the gray sky. Ellie looked at that building and felt the sting of rejection all over again, not in her pride, but in her bones. She had asked for a quiet job. She had been told she was unfit to mop floors in the place where she had tried to belong. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. A bus hissed past, spraying water from the curb. A taxi honked, a pedestrian cursed. Ellie stepped closer to the curb, waiting for the light to change, and let the rain wash her face like it could rinse off the day. She started walking, counting intersections the way other people counted prayers. Ellie started walking, counting intersections the way other people counted prayers. The light changed at Colfax. She stepped off the curb with the rain clinging to her eyelashes, her purse strap tight in her fist, her mind trying to stay in the soft lane of ordinary. The street hissed with tires cutting through shallow water. A bus rolled by, windows fogged, silhouettes blurred behind glass. For a moment, she let herself imagine she was just another person heading home, another pair of wet shoes on a gray afternoon. Then the world punched her in the chest. A low, percussive boom rolled through downtown like thunder trapped underground. Not lightning. Not construction. It was too heavy. Too physical. The sound arrived a split second after the pressure did, and every nerve in her body recognized it. Windows rattled. A car alarm started wailing, then another. A flock of pigeons burst from the ledge of a parking garage in a frantic spiral. Ellie stopped mid-step. Across the intersection, a man dropped his umbrella as if his hands forgot how to hold it. A woman screamed a name that no one answered. Farther down the street, black smoke climbed into the sky in a thick column, oily and wrong, spreading like ink and water. Ellie's pulse did not spike. It settled. Her breathing flattened out into a steady rhythm that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with function. She turned toward the smoke. People were already running the other way, splashing through puddles. Eyes wide, faces pale, hands clamped over mouths. Someone shoved past her hard enough to spin her shoulder. Ellie barely moved. She kept her balance without thinking, her feet planting like they knew where the ground was, even when everything else tilted. The smoke was rising from the direction of Front Range Memorial. Ellie's jaw tightened. Her mind tried to offer her an exit. Keep walking. Go home. Let the professionals do it. You tried. You got rejected. This is not your problem. Then a child's scream cut through the noise, raw and thin. Ellie's hand slid into her purse, not for her phone, for the compact black pouch tucked beside her wallet, the one she carried even when she told herself she was done. She felt the Velcro edge, the shape of folded gauze, the hard curve of a tourniquet. Simple tools. Real tools. The kind that did not care about resumes. She broke into a run. The rain made the pavement slick, but her stride was sure. She moved through the crowd like water through rocks, weaving without hesitation, reading people the way she read rooms. Panic had patterns. Fear had angles. Ellie cut through them. The smoke grew thicker as she closed the distance. It stung her eyes and coated the back of her throat with the taste of burning rubber and fuel. Sirens started in the distance, then multiplied, echoing off buildings, until the air itself seemed to vibrate. 2 blocks from the hospital, the street opened into chaos. A fuel tanker sat at a sick angle across the intersection. Its rear wheels twisted metal, groaning as flames licked along its underside. A city bus lay on its side. Its windows shattered, its roof crumpled against a construction barrier for the new hospital wing. Rebar jutted out like broken bones. Debris littered the roadway, chunks of concrete and twisted railings scattered as if the city had been shaken and dropped. People were everywhere. Some ran. Some stood frozen, staring. Some moved in jerky, frantic motions, shouting into phones that no one could hear over the noise. Others lay on the asphalt, bodies contorted still or trembling. A man crawled away on his hands, leaving a dark smear behind him. A woman staggered in circles, clutching her head, blood streaming between her fingers. A police officer stood near the cordon, trying to push people back with one arm, while talking into his radio with the other. His voice cracked with strain. Back up, I said, back up. We need fire. We need EMS. We need everyone." Ellie did not stop. The officer saw her and lifted his hand. "Ma'am, get back. It's not safe." Ellie met his eyes for 1 second. "Medical," she said, and kept moving. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried weight. She ducked under the taped line before the officer could decide whether to chase her. He hesitated, then turned back to the crowd. He had too many problems already. Ellie moved into the warm zone. Heat pressed against her skin like an open oven. The tanker flames snapped and hissed in the rain, fuel fighting water in ugly bursts. She scanned fast, not the way a civilian looked, overwhelmed by everything. The way someone trained looked, sorting the scene into priorities. Ambulances were stuck 3 blocks back, boxed in by gridlocked traffic and debris. Fire trucks were trying to wedge into position, foam lines already snaking across wet pavement. Paramedics were on foot carrying bags and backboards, but there were not enough of them. Victims were trapped in the kill zone, the space where help could not reach quickly, and the hazard had not yet been tamed. Ellie's gaze locked on a cluster near the collapsed pedestrian bridge. A young paramedic knelt beside a man whose leg was pinned under a slab of concrete. Blood pulsed from high on the thigh, bright and urgent, splashing onto the paramedic's gloves. The paramedic's hands shook so hard he could not thread the tourniquet buckle. "I can't get it tight," he yelled, voice cracking. I can't." Ellie dropped beside him, her knees grinding into glass and grit. She felt it and ignored it. "Give it to me," she said. It was not a request. The kid froze, startled by the command. His eyes flicked to her blazer, to her hair, to the fact that she did not look like anyone assigned to this scene. Then he obeyed. His hands handed over the tourniquet like his body understood orders, even if his brain did not. Ellie looped the strap high on the thigh, pulled hard, cranked the windlass until the bleeding stopped, then locked it down with a clean snap. Her movements were quick, practiced, smooth. No wasted motion. The man under the concrete moaned, eyes rolling. Ellie leaned in close. "Listen to me," she said, voice low and steady. "You stay with me. You breathe. You do not go to sleep." His lips trembled. He tried to speak. Ellie looked at the paramedic. "Mark the time," she said. "Write it on his forehead. Then check airway. Then move to the next one. Do you understand me?" The paramedic blinked hard. Yes, ma'am." "Good." He fumbled for a marker. Ellie's hands were already in her pouch. She pulled gauze and pressed it to another wound on the man's hip, then glanced up as a woman stumbled toward them from the smoke. The woman's face was smeared with soot. Blood ran from a cut above her eyebrow. She was screaming, eyes wild. My baby is still on the bus." Ellie's chest tightened for a fraction of a second. Ellie stood. She took the woman by the shoulders. Where Ellie asked. The woman pointed, shaking. There. In the front. He was in the front. Ellie nodded once. Stay with the medics, Ellie said. Do not go back in. Look at me. Do not go back in. The woman sobbed. Her legs buckled. A firefighter grabbed her and pulled her away. Ellie turned toward the bus. The bus lay on its side like a wounded animal, metal creaking under strain. Smoke poured from the broken windows, dragging low inside. The heat near the tanker was building, and the air smelled of fuel and electrical fire. A firefighter jogged past Ellie, shouting into his radio. Another carried a Halligan tool and moved toward the bus's rear, trying to pry an emergency exit. Ellie reached the shattered window closest to the top side of the bus. It was a jagged, opening glass teeth along the frame. She grabbed the edge with both hands, tested it, then climbed in. Inside, the world was sideways. Seats stuck out at odd angles. The ceiling had become a wall. The floor slanted up toward the windows where smoke pooled thick and heavy. People were piled against each other, trapped by gravity and fear. Some screamed, some coughed and gagged. A few stared at Ellie like she was a hallucination. Ellie inhaled shallowly through her nose. Smoke scratched her lungs. She lifted her voice. Not a scream, a command. Listen, she said. If you can move your legs, you crawl to the back emergency exit. Now. Do not grab bags. Do not look for phones. Go. A man in a hoodie coughed and pointed at a woman slumped against a seat, dazed and bleeding. She can't walk. Ellie's eyes flicked to the woman. The woman's breathing was fast but present. The bleeding looked superficial. She was alive. Two of you, Ellie said, pointing. You carry her. Go. The man hesitated, eyes darting. Ellie's tone sharpened. Move. He moved. People started crawling, pulling themselves over seats, hands slipping on vinyl. Ellie guided them with gestures and quick words, pushing the ones who froze, steering the ones who panicked. She moved forward against the flow. Near the front, the bus driver slumped over the wheelhead, tilted at an angle that made the answer obvious. Ellie did not stop to mourn. Her eyes went beyond him. A man in a business suit was pinned to the floor by a metal pole that had sheared off from a handrail. The pole had pierced his shoulder and wedged into the wreckage, trapping him in place. He was conscious. His eyes were wide. His lips were blue-tinged. Pink foam bubbled at the corner of his mouth with each breath. Ellie's mind clicked into diagnosis without effort. Tension pneumothorax, she said softly. His chest rose unevenly. His neck veins bulged. His trachea was shifting to one side, a subtle angle most people would miss. The man's gaze found hers, pleading. I can't, he rasped. I can't breathe. Ellie dropped beside him, her hands already checking pulse. It was thready, fast slipping. She felt the clock ticking in her bones. She glanced down at her purse. It was still slung across her body, but her compact kit was not with her. She had left it outside when she climbed in, trusting she would not need it in the bus. She had a tourniquet. Gauze, not a decompression needle. She scanned the debris around them. A ballpoint pen lay on the floor, rolling slightly with the tilt of the bus. A small bottle of hand sanitizer had spilled from someone's bag. Ellie snatched both. She looked at the man. This is going to hurt, she said. He tried to nod, eyes filling with tears. Ellie poured sanitizer over her hands, over the pen, over the man's upper chest where she needed to work. The alcohol smell mixed with smoke and fuel. She unscrewed the pen, yanked out the ink cartridge, leaving a hollow plastic tube. Her fingers reached into her blazer pocket and found the small folding knife she always carried. She had carried it into the interview. Clay would have called it inappropriate. Ellie called it real. She flipped it open. She found the landmark with her fingertips, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, fast and sure. She made a small incision. The man screamed sharp and high, then choked on his own breath. Ellie did not flinch. She pushed the hollow pen tube into the incision. A violent hiss of trapped air burst out. The man's body jerked. Then he sucked in a breath so deep it looked like he had been resurrected. His color shifted, the blue fading. Ellie watched his eyes clear. There, she said. Good, keep breathing. He sobbed once, a single broken sound. Ellie's hands moved to the impaled pole. She did not touch it. She assessed angle and depth. She saw the blood pooling beneath him, dark and steady, not arterial spurting, but the pole was lodged deep enough to be a problem if moved wrong. "Can you tell me your name?" Ellie asked, keeping her voice level. The man swallowed hard. "Mark," he whispered. "Mark Halverson." Ellie's fingers paused. That name hit her like a flashbang in a small room. Senator Mark Halverson. She had never met him in daylight. She had heard his voice in secure recordings, seen his signature on documents, sealed behind layers of clearance. He had been a name that moved budgets and lives. He had been a man who could end programs with a pen and start them with a nod. He stared at her, not recognizing her. Of course he did not. He had never seen her face in that world. In that world, she had been masked, unnamed, a ghost, moving in and out of blood-soaked darkness. Ellie leaned closer. "Okay, Senator," she said quietly. "You're staying with me." His eyes squeezed shut. He shook with pain. The smoke grew thicker. Heat pressed closer. The tanker fire popped outside a deep whoosh that made the bus frame shudder. Ellie looked toward the rear of the bus where passengers were crawling out. Firefighters shouted. Metal screamed as tools bit into wreckage. A firefighter's head appeared in the shattered window behind Ellie, face-masked, eyes wide. "Lady, we gotta go," he shouted. "The tank might blow again. We're pulling back." Ellie stared at him for half a second, then snapped her gaze back to the senator. "I have a viable patient pinned," she yelled back. "I need a saw. I need the rail cut." "No time," the firefighter barked. "We're not risking more personnel." Ellie felt a cold edge rise in her chest. Not panic, not rage, something focused and dangerous. She looked up at the firefighter. "Give me your radio," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Give me the radio." Her tone made it clear she would take it either way. The firefighter hesitated, then reached for the radio clipped to his vest. Ellie snatched it. She keyed the mic like she had done it 1,000 times, thumb finding the button without searching. Her voice came out calm and authoritative, stripped of emotion built for command. "This is Medic 1 actual at crash site," Ellie said, choosing words that would get traction. "I have a red tag patient pinned in the bus. Fire is encroaching. I need immediate suppression line on bus entry and a reciprocating saw now." There was a burst of static. Then another voice, deeper clipped. "Say again, Medic 1 actual." Ellie repeated, slower, crisp. A pause. "Copy," the voice replied. "Stand by." The firefighter stared at her as if she had grown a second head. "Who are you?" he demanded. Ellie did not look away from the senator. "I'm the help," she said. "Hold pressure on the door and keep the smoke down." The firefighter opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. He ducked out, shouting to his crew. Ellie returned the radio to her shoulder and leaned closer to the senator. "Mark," she said, using his first name like it belonged in this moment. "Listen to me. You are going to stay awake. You are going to breathe. You are going to squeeze my hand." He tried. His fingers twitched. Ellie took his hand and held it firm. Outside, boots thudded on wet pavement. A foam line began spraying the sound like a giant hose roaring. The smoke thinned slightly near the window as firefighters repositioned. A minute later, the firefighter returned, hauling a saw. Another firefighter followed with a pry bar. "You know how to use that," the firefighter shouted over the noise. Ellie's mouth tightened. "Yes," she said. She took the saw. It was heavier than it looked, vibrating with potential. She handed it back to the firefighter. "Cut the rail here," she said, pointing. "Not there. You cut there, he bleeds out before we move him." The firefighter stared at her finger, then at the senator, then back at her. He nodded once sharp. "Cover his eyes," Ellie told the senator. The senator tried to lift his free hand. Ellie helped him. She pressed his palm to his forehead, shielding him from sparks. The saw screamed as it bit into metal. Sparks flew in bright arcs, bouncing off soot and blood. Heat surged. The smoke dropped lower. Ellie kept her body between the senator and the flame line as much as she could, shoulders braced, knife still in her pocket, pen, tube still in his chest, hissing softly with each breath. The metal finally snapped. "Now," Ellie said. Firefighters grabbed the senator, carefully supporting his torso, keeping the impaled pole stabilized. Ellie guided their hands, correcting grip, her voice fast and controlled. "Do not pull it," she snapped. "Keep it steady, move with me." They dragged him toward the shattered window. A sudden whoosh outside made the bus shudder. Fuel fumes ignited in a pocket, sending a wave of heat that rolled over them like an invisible punch. Ellie ducked instinctively. Fire swept past the window opening bright enough to turn the smoke orange. They shoved through anyway, pushing the senator out first, then Ellie, following, hands gripping the slick edge of the frame. They hit the pavement hard. Rain slapped Ellie's face. Cold air flooded her lungs, and for a second she tasted only wet asphalt and smoke. The senator groaned, eyes squeezed shut, chest rising. Ellie checked the pen tube. Still in place, still venting. His breathing was less labored now, but he was not safe. Not yet. "Get him to the perimeter triage line," Ellie ordered. Firefighters moved, half carrying, half dragging. Ellie walked alongside, one hand hovering near the impaled pole, as if she could keep the world steady by force of will. They reached the edge of the police cordon. Paramedics were clustered there, trying to set up triage while being drowned by chaos. Stretchers were scarce. Backboards were being used as gurneys. People shouted over each other. A medic yelled for more tourniquets. Another screamed for pediatric kits. Ellie stepped into the middle of it like she owned it. "Red tag coming through," she called, voice cutting through noise. Chest decompressed. "Impaled shoulder. Needs immediate transport." A seasoned paramedic looked up, eyes narrowing as he took in her soot-streaked blazer, the blood on her hands, the senator's face. The paramedic's expression shifted recognition mixed with alarm. "That's Halvorsen," he said. "I know," Ellie replied. The paramedic gestured, snapping into action. "Get a backboard, clear a path, move." A police officer started to block them, then saw the senator and stepped aside with a curse. Ellie moved with the group, pushing toward the hospital, toward the blocked access road. They rounded the corner, and the problem became obvious. Debris from the crash and the collapsed pedestrian bridge had choked the main route to the emergency entrance. Concrete slabs and twisted railing lay in a dense field. A crushed taxi sat at an angle hood smoking. A delivery van had been shoved onto the sidewalk. Firefighters were trying to clear it, but the amount of rubble was enormous, and the heat from the tanker made it dangerous. Ambulances idled farther back, lights flashing, trapped by traffic. Their sirens were muffled by distance and frustration. Patients were piling up in the gap between the scene and the hospital doors. Ellie looked at the senator. His skin was pale, lips dry, breathing faster again. Pain and shock were creeping back in. Ellie lifted her voice. "Where is the fastest route on foot?" she demanded. A firefighter pointed. "Around the east side, service corridor near the loading bay. But it's tight." "Tight is fine," Ellie said. She turned to the paramedic crew. "You?" she said, pointing at 2 firefighters. "You carry the front. Keep the shoulder stable. Do not jostle him. You," she pointed at a medic. "Keep eyes on his airway. If he starts to crash, you tell me." The medic blinked at her, as if he wanted to ask who she was. Then he saw her eyes and decided it did not matter. "Copy," the medic said. They moved. Ellie walked alongside the senator, matching the rhythm of the carry. Her mind tracked vitals without monitors. Respiratory rate, skin color, level of consciousness. She watched for the subtle signs of worsening shock. The senator's eyes fluttered open once. He looked at her, confusion and pain in his gaze. "Who?" he rasped. Ellie leaned close enough that only he could hear. "Breathe," she said. "Save your voice." He swallowed, grimacing. They turned down an alley-like corridor beside the hospital, wet pavement, slick with rain. A loading dock door stood open, staff spilling out with gurneys they could not bring through the rubble. A nurse in scrubs stood at the threshold, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide. "We can't get them in," she shouted. "The road is blocked." Ellie stepped forward. "Then we go around," Ellie said. "We bring them on foot." The nurse stared at Ellie, taking in her soot and blood. "Who are you?" the nurse asked. Ellie did not slow. "Someone who wants those doors open," Ellie replied. They pushed through the loading bay and into the hospital service corridor. The air changed immediately. Outside was smoke and fuel and rain. Inside was sterile dryness and fluorescent light. The smell of disinfectant was sharp, almost comforting in its certainty. Ellie felt the shift in her body the way her muscles tightened not from fear, but from memory. Hospitals always carried a different kind of pressure. This one carried it in polished tiles and hushed voices in the assumption that control existed. They moved fast down the corridor, boots thudding, gurney wheels rattling. Staff stepped aside startled. A janitor froze with a mop in hand, eyes wide. Trauma, coming through the medic, shouted. Doors flew open. They entered a wider hallway that led toward the emergency department. A sign on the wall read "Emergency" in clean letters. Below it, a smaller sign listed visiting hours and rules about masks. Ellie almost laughed at the contrast. The world outside was burning. Inside, the rules still hung politely on the wall. As they approached the ER bay doors, the noise changed again. Shouting, running feet, overhead paging, the sharp chirp of alarms. A group of doctors in white coats stood near the entrance, clustered behind a line of police and staff looking out toward the blocked road with tense frustration. At their center was Dr. Everett Clay. He was sweating now, hair slightly out of place, stethoscope hanging like a badge of authority he needed to believe in. His mouth was moving, barking orders, but his eyes kept darting toward the smoke. Ellie watched him for half a second. This morning, he had stood behind a desk and decided she was useless. Now he stood at a threshold and looked like a man realizing the world did not care what he believed. Clay's gaze snapped onto the incoming group. He saw the senator's face. His expression shifted, shock and calculation colliding. Then he saw Ellie. For a moment, he did not move. His eyes narrowed as if his brain rejected the image. As if she could not be here. Not after he had thrown her away. Ellie did not stop. She walked beside the senator's gurney, hands guiding, voice already forming the handoff. They reached the doors. Clay stepped forward instinctively, then hesitated. Eyes flicking to the pen tube venting from the senator's chest to the impaled rail stabilized against his shoulder. What happened? Clay demanded, voice tight. Ellie met his gaze. Tension pneumothorax, she said. Decompressed in the field. Impaled shoulder with probable vascular involvement. Do not remove the object until you have control. Clay stared at the pen tube as if it were an insult. You did that with a pen, he said, disbelief breaking through. Ellie's tone stayed flat. I used what I had. She looked past him into the trauma bay where staff scrambled and monitors beeped, where the smell of antiseptic mixed with sweat and fear. Move him, Ellie said. Orderlies grabbed the gurney handles. Doctors stepped aside. The doors swung open. The trauma bay swallowed them bright and loud and unforgiving, and the first blast of sterile air hit Ellie's lungs like a memory she could not shake. The sterile air filled Ellie's lungs and brought a familiar kind of clarity with it, the kind that did not ask permission and did not care what her resume looked like. Trauma. Bay 2 was already alive with motion. Bright lights, metal trays, the sharp chemical bite of disinfectant, monitors chirping like anxious birds. Staff moved in tight arcs around stretchers, hands gloved, voices clipped, everyone trying to look like they had control while the city burned outside. Clear the room, a nurse shouted. Where is radiology? Another voice snapped. Pressure is dropping, someone called from behind a curtain. Ellie walked in beside Senator Mark Halverson's gurney, one hand hovering near the improvised chest vent, eyes scanning the bay in a single sweep. The senator's face was ashen under the fluorescent glare. His suit jacket had been cut away. The metal rail still jutted from his shoulder, stabilized with towels and tape. The pen barrel in his chest hissed faintly with each breath, a plastic prayer holding back collapse. Dr. Everett Clay pushed into the bay at the head of the gurney, trying to reclaim the air like it belonged to him. Vitals, Clay barked. BP 90 over 50 and trending down, said a nurse. Heart rate 130, another voice replied. Respirations 30. Clay's gaze flicked to the pen tube. Disbelief tightened his jaw. Ellie did not wait for him to decide whether he approved. She leaned over the senator and spoke close to his ear. "Senator, stay with me. Blink if you hear me." Halvorson's eyelids fluttered. A weak blink. He tried to speak and grimaced. "Don't," Ellie said. "Save your air." A nurse stepped in, older, steady eyes sharp. Her badge read, "Lila Vargas, charge nurse." She took one look at the senator and the impaled object and the pen tube, then looked at Ellie. "You did the decompression," Lila said. Ellie nodded once. Lila's attention shifted to Clay. "We need a chest tube now," Lila said. "That pen is not a plan." Clay snapped into action, as if he had been waiting for someone else to name the obvious. "Get a thoracostomy tray," he ordered. "Prep right chest, sterile field." A resident in a rumpled white coat stepped forward, young glasses, smudged hands trying not to shake. Dr. Nolan Park. Ellie recognized him from the corridor earlier. The kind of resident who cared enough to be terrified. Nolan cleared his throat. "Doctor, should we image first? Fast scan. Chest X-ray." Clay's eyes flashed. "We are not waiting for imaging while he decompensates. Move." Lila was already moving. She snapped on sterile gloves, tossed a drape, opened a tray with the quick competence of someone who had done this too many times. Ellie stepped slightly back, making space without leaving the senator's side. A medic pushed through the doors, breathless face streaked with smoke. Jesse, the young paramedic from the street. His eyes widened when he saw Ellie in the trauma bay, still in her ruined blazer. "You got him here, Jesse," blurted, almost disbelieving. Ellie did not look away from the senator. "Stay useful," she said. "Tell me how many Reds are outside." Jesse swallowed. "At least 12. More coming. The access road is still blocked." Clay heard it, and his shoulders tightened. "Where is EMS staging?" Clay demanded. Jesse pointed with a trembling hand. "Perimeter 3 blocks. They're bringing them in on foot." Clay swore under his breath. He glanced toward the sliding doors, toward the blurred silhouettes and flashing red light outside. "Get triage set at the loading bay," Clay said. "If we cannot get them through the main entrance, we make a new entrance." Lila met his gaze. "We need more hands," she said. Clay looked around the room as if counting bodies like resources. His eyes landed on Ellie, and for a moment the resentment returned, sharp and personal. "You," Clay said. "What are you still doing here?" Ellie's voice stayed level. "He is unstable. That is my patient now," Clay snapped. Ellie's eyes did not flinch. "Then keep him alive." Clay opened his mouth, but Lila cut in. "She brought him in," Lila said. "And she's not panicking. I'll take that." Clay's jaw worked. His pride and his fear argued behind his eyes. The monitor alarmed again, a frantic rising tone. "Fine," Clay bit out. "If you are going to hover, then assist. Hold that rail steady and do not touch my sterile field." Ellie did not answer. She moved to the senator's right side and braced the impaled rail, keeping it from vibrating with each jolt of movement in the bed. Her grip was firm, careful, the kind of careful that understood how easily a life could tear open. Clay prepped the senator's chest with antiseptic and injected local anesthetic with practiced speed. He made an incision between ribs, the senator groaning and clenching his jaw. The pen tube hissed again as the senator tried to inhale. "Pressure is dropping," Nolan said, voice thin. 80/40. Clay pushed his fingers into the incision, spreading tissue, finding the pleural space. A burst of air escaped louder now, and the senator's chest rose more evenly. "Tube," Clay ordered. Lila handed it. Clay fed the chest tube in twisting, advancing, then secured it with sutures. The pen tube was removed and tossed into a tray like trash. Ellie watched the senator's color shift slightly, a fraction less gray. The monitor steadied by a degree, not safe, but not falling as fast. Clay's eyes went to the impaled rail again, then to the senator's blood pressure. "Or," Clay said now, "vascular." Lila's gaze sharpened. "Vascular is tied up in trauma 1, and anesthesia is short." Clay's face tightened as if the building itself had betrayed him. "Then we do it ourselves," he said. "Call the attending anesthesiologist." A nurse shook her head. "Dr. Whitaker is in the elevator with a cardiac arrest patient from the lobby. The elevator is down because the power surge from the crash tripped something." Clay's nostrils flared. He looked like a man choking on circumstances he could not command. Outside the bay, another stretcher rolled by. A woman screaming. A child crying. A man, bleeding through a towel pressed to his abdomen. The ER was filling with the sound of too many emergencies at once. Clay's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, then yanked it out and glanced at the screen. His face changed a flicker of something like dread. Leela caught it. "Bored," she said quietly. Clay's eyes hardened. "Of course it is." He shoved the phone back into his pocket, but the weight of it stayed on him. The donors, the cameras, the ranking, all the things that mattered to people who never stood in smoke. "Move him," Clay ordered. "Surgery now." They rolled the gurney out into the corridor into a stream of chaos. Staff rushed past with carts and meds and supplies. A security officer tried to direct traffic and failed. A television in a waiting area blared the first shaky news report footage of smoke and flames, and a banner at the bottom reading, "Major Incident Downtown." Ellie walked alongside the senator's gurney, one hand still steadying the impaled rail, her other hand free, eyes scanning. She heard voices around her fragments. "2 more incoming bus passengers. We are out of O negative. Respiratory needs vents. Call pediatrics." The building felt like a machine overheating. They reached the OR doors. A scrub nurse blocked the threshold with a clipboard and a practiced glare. "Who is this?" she demanded. Senator Halverson, Lila said, and the scrub nurse's face went tight. The senator's security detail arrived in a sudden wave, men in suits that moved like armor. They spilled into the hallway, speaking into earpieces, eyes scanning corners. Clay turned sharply. "Who authorized them in my surgical corridor?" One of the agents stepped forward, calm and firm. "We are here to protect the senator," the agent said. His voice carried the kind of authority that did not need volume. Clay bristled. "Protection happens outside the OR. This is a sterile environment." The agent's gaze did not change. He was attacked. Clay stared. It was a traffic accident. The agent said nothing, and the silence landed like a closed door. Ellie felt the senator's hand twitch weakly on the gurney rail. Pain made people small. Power made people dangerous. The senator lay between those worlds, now bleeding in both. Lila leaned toward Clay. "We are losing time," she said. Clay exhaled hard, then pointed. "2 agents outside the door," he said. "Nobody else. If you interfere, he dies, and you can explain that to whoever signs your paycheck." The agent nodded, once expression unreadable, and stepped back. They pushed the senator into the operating room. The OR was bright and cold and brutally clean. Stainless steel gleamed. Surgical lights hung like suns. The smell of antiseptic was sharp enough to sting. The monitor alarms filled the space, relentless and impatient. Ellie took in the room and felt her body settle into the old rhythm, the one she tried to bury. The one that came back the moment she heard that tone in the monitor. "Rapid sequence," Clay ordered. "We cannot wait for anesthesia." Nolan Park stepped into position at the head of the bed, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted equipment. He swallowed, trying to hide fear behind training. "Do you want etomidate and succinylcholine?" Nolan asked. Clay nodded. 20 etomidate. 100 sucks. Move. A nurse drew meds. Lila watched Nolan's hands. "Cricoid pressure," Lila said, stepping in, pressing gently at the neck. Nolan lifted the laryngoscope. His face was pale under the surgical cap. He slid the blade in, tried to visualize the chords. "I can't see," Nolan whispered. He adjusted, tried again, sweat shining at his hairline. "It's a bad view." The senator's chest rose shallowly. The monitor beeped faster. Tube Clay snapped. Nolan's hands shook. He tried to pass the tube blind, then pulled back, panic creeping into his breathing. "I can't," Nolan said, voice cracking. "I can't see the chords. I'm going to esophageal it." Clay cursed. He started to step in, but his hands were already moving toward the shoulder incision site, toward the bleed that would not wait. If he took the airway, no one would control the hemorrhage. If he did not take the airway, the senator would arrest. The room tightened with tension, every person holding breath. Ellie moved. Not dramatic. Not loud. She simply stepped to the head of the bed and reached past the standard gear. Her fingers closed on the video laryngoscope handle and a bougie, the thin guide that turned a difficult airway into a possible one. Clay glared, "Do not touch my airway." Ellie did not look at him. She looked at the senator's jaw, the blood pressure, the oxygen saturation dropping on the monitor. "Cricoid pressure," Ellie said softly to Lila. Lila's eyes flicked to Ellie, then her hands adjusted without question. Ellie slid the blade in with controlled finesse, not forcing, not levering. The small screen lit with the image of the airway, the cords appearing like pale folds in a red tunnel. "Bougie," Ellie said. Nolan handed it automatically, relief and embarrassment tangled in his face. Ellie threaded it through the cords, felt the subtle clicks as it passed rings, then guided the tube over it with a steady hand. "Remove," Ellie said. Nolan pulled the bougie. Ellie watched the tube placement on the screen, then looked at the chest. "Beg," she said. The nurse squeezed. The senator's chest rose. The monitor responded. Oxygen climbed. Ellie's movements took seconds. The room felt like it exhaled for the first time in a minute. Clay stared at her, then at the screen, then back at her hands, as if he had seen an animal do calculus. "How?" Clay began, voice low. Ellie cut him off with one sentence, flat and urgent. "Map is still falling. Fix the shoulder." Clay snapped back to his role like someone yanked him by a rope. "Incision," he barked. "Suction. Satinsky clamp ready. We need exposure." The surgery began in a rush. Clay cut along the clavicle, working around the impaled rail. Blood welled up dark and fast. Not a slow ooze, a flood. The suction gurgled, immediately struggling to keep up. "More suction," Clay shouted. The canister filled with alarming speed. Nolan stood near the field, eyes wide, hands hovering, trying to be useful. "It's subclavian," Nolan blurted. "It has to be. We need proximal control." Clay's face tightened as the field became red. "I can't see," Clay snarled. "I can't see anything." Lila adjusted lights. A nurse wiped. The suction pulled. Still blood kept rising. "Cross clamp Nolan," said, voice breaking. "He's bleeding out." Clay's hand reached for the clamp, desperation edging into his posture. He angled it toward the wound, ready to clamp blind. The kind of choice that came when you were out of time and out of pride. Ellie's eyes tracked the anatomy, the distortion caused by the rail, the swelling, the angle of the clavicle. In her mind, a map formed that had nothing to do with textbooks and everything to do with hands in darkness, bodies under stress, minutes counted in heartbeats. "No," Ellie said. Clay did not hear her. He moved anyway. Ellie's hand shot out and caught his wrist. The OR went still. Every head turned. Air felt sharper. Even the monitor beep seemed to pause in judgment. Clay's eyes flared with fury. "Get your hand off me." Ellie's grip stayed firm but controlled. She did not squeeze. She restrained. "You clamp there," Ellie said, voice calm enough to be terrifying. "You hit the phrenic nerve." Clay's rage faltered for half a second, replaced by confusion, then anger again. "I have to stop the bleeding," Clay snapped. "He is dying." "Not like that," Ellie said. She released his wrist and stepped in closer to the table. Clay's mouth opened to protest. Ellie did not give him time. She plunged her gloved hand into the wound. A nurse gasped. Nolan looked like he might be sick. Clay recoiled, shocked. "What the hell are you doing?" Ellie closed her eyes. She was not looking, she was feeling. Her fingers moved through warm tissue-slick fascia, the slippery chaos of a living body trying to die. She ignored the blood that coated her glove. She ignored the suction roaring beside her. She navigated by pressure and pulse. She found the artery by vibration, a throbbing force against her fingertip. She felt the tear, the ragged edge, the way blood surged with each heartbeat. She felt a thin cord beside it, wire-like and delicate. She shifted her finger a fraction of an inch, sliding past that cord. Then she pressed. Hard. Her fingertip pinned the artery against the first rib. The field changed instantly. The blood stopped flooding. Suction cleared the pooled red and the wound stayed clear. Ellie opened her eyes. "Bleeding controlled," she said, voice steady. "You have a dry field." Clay stared into the wound as if his eyes did not trust it. Then he saw it. The tear. The exact location. The nerve, glistening intact, sitting a breath away from where his clamp had been headed. Clay's face drained. His anger had nowhere to go. "Stitch," Clay said, and his voice sounded different. Not humbled exactly. Something lower than that, like reality, had shoved him to his knees. A nurse handed him suture. Clay repaired the vessel with careful hands, now the hands of a skilled surgeon who had just been reminded that skill did not make him invincible. He worked in silence, focusing sweat slipping down his temple under the surgical cap. Ellie held a pressure without wavering. Her forearm burned. Her fingers cramped. She adjusted her grip in tiny increments, never releasing the artery, never letting blood surge back. Minutes stretched. The monitor continued its anxious song, but the numbers stabilized enough to breathe. Nolan watched Ellie's hand buried in the senator's shoulder and looked at her like she was something he had not known existed. Lila moved around the room, anticipating needs, passing instruments, calling out vitals in a steady cadence. The OR became a place of grim synchrony, every person locked into the same single purpose. Clay tied a knot deep in the cavity. Ellie shifted her wrist to give him a better angle without releasing pressure. Clay did not speak. He did not need to. He moved, and Ellie adjusted like they had done this together before, like a spotter and a shooter, each trusting the other with the consequences. After a long stretch that felt like an hour in a white box, Clay finally said, "Flow restored." He sounded exhausted. He sounded relieved. He sounded like he had been quietly afraid. Ellie slowly eased pressure, careful, watching for the surge. The artery pulsed under her glove. The repair held. No leak. A nurse exhaled sharply. Nolan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Clay stared at the repaired vessel, then at Ellie's blood-soaked glove, then at Ellie's face. Ellie stepped back. She peeled off her outer gloves with controlled movements. Underneath her hands trembled slightly, a delayed reaction to adrenaline and strain. She flexed her fingers once as if testing whether they still belonged to her. Clay pulled off his mask and turned to the room. "Close," he said. "Staples, dressings. I see you ready." Staff moved, relief and urgency mixing in their bodies. The senator lay quiet now, ventilated, stabilized enough to survive the next hour. Clay's eyes stayed on Ellie. "Mercer," he said. Ellie looked up. "My office," Clay said. 10 minutes. It was a command by habit, but it landed wrong now. The room had watched Ellie take control without raising her voice. They had watched her stop Clay from making a catastrophic mistake. Authority had shifted in a way that could not be stitched back. Ellie's expression did not change. "I saved your patient," she said. "You're welcome." Clay's jaw tightened. "You hijacked my OR and performed unauthorized maneuvers." "I performed necessary maneuvers," Ellie replied. Clay's eyes flicked to Nolan, to Lila, to the nurses who were still staring at Ellie, like she was a storm that walked in off the street. "You are not on staff," Clay said. "You are not credentialed here." "Technically, I should call security." Ellie nodded once. "Do it if it helps you sleep." Clay's voice dropped quieter, more dangerous. "I want to know why a woman with hands like that applied for an ER nurse lead position with an empty resume." Ellie held his gaze. "I need health insurance," she said. It was the truth that mattered. It was also the only truth she was willing to give. Clay looked like he wanted to argue, but the OR doors swung open and another wave of noise hit him. A nurse shouted for more blood units. A resident ran by with a chart. The mass casualty did not pause for Clay's curiosity. Clay's mouth tightened. 10 minutes, he repeated. Ellie turned and walked out. The corridor outside the OR was hotter now, crowded with staff and security and rolling carts. The senator's agents stood at the door like stone. One of them watched Ellie pass, eyes narrowed as if trying to place her in a memory that would not resolve. Ellie kept moving. She found a locker room down the hall, a cramped space with bright lights and a row of metal lockers. A shower hissed behind a plastic curtain. Ellie stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned her forehead against cold metal for a second. Her breathing was steady. Her hands were not. She stripped off her blazer, now ruined beyond saving. Soot and blood streaked the fabric. Her blouse smelled of smoke and disinfectant. She peeled off clothing with careful, tired motions, the way you undress when you have nothing left to prove. She turned on the shower. Water slammed down, hot at first, then settling into a steady stream. Ellie stepped under it and let it hit her shoulders. She scrubbed her arms until her skin reddened, trying to wash away someone else's blood, trying to wash away the feeling of being needed again. The sound of the water drowned out the world for a moment. In that pocket of steam and tile, Ellie felt something she had not felt in a long time. Silence. Not true silence. Just the noise in her head lowering, as if the part of her that was built for crisis had finally been fed. She shut off the water. She dried off with a thin towel. She had no spare clothes. She put her smoke-stained blouse back on, and her ruined pants, the fabric stiff at the knees where she had knelt in glass outside. She tied her hair back tighter. She looked in the mirror. Her eyes looked older than this morning. A knock sounded on the locker room door. Ellie opened it. A nurse stood there holding a paper bag. "Lila told me you might need something," the nurse said. Her voice was careful, respectful. "Scrubs. They're not your size, but it's better than that." Ellie took the bag. "Thank you," she said. The nurse hesitated. "Are you military?" she asked quietly. Ellie met her gaze. "I'm tired," Ellie said. The nurse nodded as if that answered the question. Ellie changed into the oversized scrubs. The waistband cinched tight. The sleeves hung long. She looked smaller in them, almost ordinary, except nothing about her posture was ordinary. She stepped back into the corridor and followed signs toward the administrative wing toward Clay's office. The hospital had changed while she showered. The chaos had spread upward like heat. More security. More whispered conversations. Staff moving faster, eyes sharper. A television in a hallway showed live footage of smoke and emergency lights. The words "major incident" were still crawling across the bottom of the screen. Ellie passed a glass window that looked down onto the ER entrance. She saw stretchers coming in through the loading bay. She saw Lila directing traffic with a sharp hand. She saw Nolan running beside a gurney, face tense but focused. She kept walking. Clay's office waited at the end of a carpeted corridor, a quieter world above the blood and noise. The carpet muffled footsteps. The air smelled like leather and expensive cleaning products. The walls held abstract art that meant nothing to anyone bleeding. Ellie knocked once and entered. Clay stood by his desk with his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly damp with sweat. A bottle of whiskey sat open beside his computer, as if he had needed something strong to swallow what had happened. He did not offer her a seat. Then, as if realizing the habit no longer fit, he gestured stiffly. "Sit," Clay said. Ellie sat. Clay poured himself a drink. He did not offer her one. "Senator Halverson is stable," Clay said. "He is in ICU. His security detail is everywhere." Ellie nodded. Clay's gaze held hers searching. "I have never seen anyone identify the phrenic nerve by touch," he said. "In that kind of blood." Ellie's face stayed neutral. She did not accept praise like a gift. Praise came with strings. Clay stepped closer to his computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I ran your name again," he said. Ellie did not react. Clay typed. He clicked. He entered her information into the hospital credentialing system, into the background check portal, into whatever professional database he trusted to tell him who a person was. He frowned. He tried a different portal. His mouth tightened. "I'm seeing nothing," Clay said more to himself than to her. "It's the same. State school, county hospital, gap." He typed again, harder, like pressure could force truth out of a machine. The cursor blinked. Then the screen froze. A small spinning icon appeared, then vanished. The monitor went black for a heartbeat. When it returned, a single line sat in the center of the screen. "Access denied." Clay stared at it. He swallowed. Ellie watched him, expression unreadable. Clay's hand moved toward his phone, as if pulled by instinct. His fingers hesitated over it. He looked back at Ellie, and for the first time his voice held something other than arrogance. "Who are you?" Clay asked. Ellie's eyes stayed on his. I'm a nurse, she said. Clay stared at the dark warning on his screen, then at Ellie's hands, then at the quiet way she sat in his office, like she belonged in any room she chose. Outside his window, Denver's rain kept falling and the city kept burning in the distance, unseen but not forgotten. Clay stared at the warning on his screen as if it had spoken out loud. Ellie sat across from him in scrubs that did not fit, hands folded loosely in her lap, posture straight but not rigid. The kind of stillness that looked calm until you noticed it never softened. I'm a nurse, she repeated, voice steady. Clay's fingers hovered over the keyboard like he might try brute force again. His jaw worked once, a muscle jumping near his ear. Then, why does my system treat you like a national secret? He said. Ellie's gaze flicked to the window for a fraction of a second. Rain streaked the glass. Far below, the city pulsed with sirens and brake lights. The smoke plume had thinned, but it still stained the sky over downtown. Maybe your system is smarter than you, Ellie said. Clay's eyes narrowed. Don't get cute. Ellie did not smile. I'm not. A knock hit the door. Not polite, not tentative. 3 quick raps that sounded like someone announcing a fact. Clay straightened automatically. Yes. The door opened without waiting for an answer. 3 people stepped in. 2 men in dark suits moved first. Not hospital security. Not administrators. Their shoulders were set differently. Their eyes tracked the room corners first, then hands, then faces. One wore an earpiece tucked neatly behind his ear. The other had the stillness of someone who never fidgeted. Between them walked a woman in a slate-colored suit that probably cost more than Clay's desk. Steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob, makeup minimal, expression dry as stone. Clay stood. Excuse me, this is a private office. The woman did not look at him. She looked at Ellie. For the first time since this morning, Ellie's mask shifted. Just a degree. A flicker behind the eyes, recognition and resignation meeting in the same breath. The woman set a black folder on Clay's desk. It landed with a heavy sound, not loud but final. A red stripe cut across the corner like a warning label. The woman spoke as if she were continuing a conversation Ellie had tried to end. Eleanor Mercer, she said. You picked an interesting place to go quiet. Clay's gaze snapped to Ellie. You know her. The woman's eyes finally moved to Clay. She looked at him the way you looked at furniture that had started talking. I know what she is, she said. Clay forced his voice into authority. Ma'am, you cannot just walk into my office. Who are you? The woman reached into her jacket and produced a badge. It was not police, not FBI, not anything Clay could name. A silver eagle on a black field. Clay's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My name is Diane Cross, the woman said. For your purposes, Director Cross will do. She shifted her gaze back to Ellie. We thought you were in Patagonia. Ellie's eyes stayed on Cross. I was. Then you came to Denver, Cross said. You walked into a major trauma center and performed field surgery on a protected individual. Clay's head turned sharply. Protected individual. Cross did not answer him. She did not need to. One of the men in suits stepped forward and closed the office door with controlled precision, then stood with his back to it. The air changed, not because of a threat spoken out loud, but because everyone in the room understood the rules had shifted. Ellie exhaled one slow and quiet. I told you, Ellie said to Cross, I'm done. Cross leaned in slightly, voice still calm. You are done when I say you are done. Clay found his voice. What is this? Who are you people? This is a hospital. Cross's expression did not move. That is correct. Which is why you should stop making noise and start listening. Clay bristled. I am the chief of emergency medicine. Cross's eyes finally sharpened. Then you should have noticed you just tried to background check someone your system cannot legally identify. Clay's face flushed. I did not. Cross tilted her head. Your terminal disagrees. Clay's gaze dropped to the black folder. His fingers moved toward it, then stopped as if he feared it might burn him. Ellie watched him. Her voice was quiet. Don't, she said. Clay froze. What? Ellie nodded toward the folder. If you open that without permission, you make your day worse. Clay's pride wanted to fight. His fear already had. Cross placed a single finger on the folder and slid it toward Ellie. Ellie did not touch it. Cross's voice softened just enough to sound almost human. Senator Halverson is awake. Ellie's eyes narrowed. He should not be awake. He insisted, Cross said. He is asking for you. Clay's throat bobbed. Why would a United States Senator ask for her? Cross looked at Clay again. Because he saw her in the bus. Clay stared, trying to assemble a reality he could understand. The bus. Cross's gaze returned to Ellie. He recognized the technique. He wants the person who kept him alive. He does not trust anyone else in your building. Clay's face tightened. He has a full ICU team. Cross's mouth flattened. He does not care. Ellie's eyes flicked away for a fraction of a second, then returned. Tell him no. Cross did not blink. I did. Ellie's voice hardened. Then tell him again. Cross paused. The room felt smaller. Then Cross spoke with a different weight. The crash was not an accident. Ellie did not move. Clay laughed, once sharp and disbelieving. It was a fuel tanker. It jackknifed. Cross's eyes stayed on Ellie. It was a hit. Ellie's jaw tightened. On him. Cross nodded. On him. Clay's breath caught. That is ridiculous. Cross ignored him. Ellie's eyes went distant, as if a part of her mind had already walked down corridors Clay could not see. They missed. Cross's voice remained steady. They missed the kill, not the intent. Clay lifted both hands. Who are they? Cross's gaze turned to him patient in a way that felt dangerous. Not your problem. Yet. Ellie leaned forward slightly. Why are you telling me this? Cross opened the folder at last. Not fully. Just enough for Clay to see the edge of thick paper photos, stamped blocks of redacted text, the weight of something that had never lived in civilian light. Cross did not slide it to Clay. She kept it closer to Ellie. Because Senator Halverson knows the location of a missing biological asset, Cross said. He is the only one who knows it. Clay's face went pale. Biological asset. Ellie's eyes narrowed. Say it. Cross held Ellie's gaze. Smallpox. The word hit the office like a physical object. Clay's chair creaked as his knees bumped it, the body reacting before the brain could make sense of it. That's impossible, Clay whispered. Smallpox was eradicated. Ellie's voice stayed flat. Not if someone kept a jar. Cross nodded once. Weaponized variant. Chimera strain. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they looked colder. Clay swallowed hard. Why would anyone bring that here? Cross's gaze flicked to the window to the city below. If the senator dies, we lose the location. If we lose the location, you will see what panic looks like when it has a pathogen. Clay's lips parted. He did not speak. Ellie's voice stayed controlled. You think they are here? Cross stepped closer. I know they're trying. The crash was designed to control where he goes. They wanted him brought to a facility where they could extract him. Clay's eyes widened. Extract him from my hospital. Cross's tone did not change. Yes. Clay's anger flared fast and defensive. This is a secure hospital. Cross looked at him like he had said something adorable. It is a building with doors. Ellie's gaze sharpened. He cannot be moved. Cross nodded. He is too unstable. He stays in ICU. Ellie sat back slightly. Then put your people in his room. Cross's eyes stayed on Ellie. My people do not understand medicine the way you do. They do not understand a hospital's blind spots. They do not know how to lock down an ICU without killing the rest of the floor. Clay's voice came out thin. What do you want? Cross looked at Ellie. I want you to run protective detail inside the hospital. Ellie stared. I am not your asset anymore. Cross's expression did not shift. Tonight, you are the barrier between a senator and a catastrophe. Ellie's hands flexed once, then stilled. Clay broke in, voice shaking with outrage and fear. You cannot deputize a civilian nurse to run security in my ICU. Cross finally turned fully toward him. I can do whatever national security requires. You can either cooperate or you can become a problem." Clay's face tightened. He looked at Ellie as if she were suddenly a wall that had risen between him and the end of his career or the end of his city. Ellie's gaze moved to Clay, then back to Cross. Ellie's voice was quiet. "I want my name clean." Cross's eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." Ellie's tone did not change. "Medical license reinstated. Service credit. No more disappearing me from databases. No more hiding." Clay stared at Ellie, confused. "What are you talking about?" Cross held Ellie's gaze for a long beat, then nodded once. "If Senator Halverson lives through the night, I will make that happen." Ellie's eyes did not soften. "In writing." Cross reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet. She placed it on the desk in front of Ellie. Ellie read it without touching it, eyes moving left to right fast. Her jaw tightened at one line. Cross watched her. "Sign it, and we proceed." Ellie looked up. "You do not get to own me again." Cross's voice was flat. "I do not want to own you. I want you standing in the right place." Ellie's gaze flicked toward the door. Outside, the hospital continued its frantic rhythm. The mass casualty response did not pause because an intelligence problem had entered an office upstairs. Ellie inhaled slowly and stood. Cross's men stepped aside without being told. Ellie looked at Clay. "Where's ICU?" Clay blinked as if his mind had been stuck on the word smallpox and could not move. "4th floor," he said. Ellie nodded once. "Walk." Clay straightened automatically, the habit of command trying to reassert itself. But he did not lead. He followed. They moved through the administrative corridor into the elevator bank. As the elevator descended, Ellie watched the numbers change, listening to the faint sound of alarms and overhead pages through the shaft walls. She could feel the hospital's stress like a heartbeat under her feet. The doors opened on the 2nd floor, then the 3rd, then the 4th. The ICU corridor was brighter than the ER, but quieter the quiet of controlled suffering. Machines beeped in steady patterns. Nurses moved with practiced softness. Families sat in chairs with hollow eyes, hands clasped, waiting for outcomes they could not influence. Ellie stepped into that world and felt the shape of it immediately. Too many doors. Too many access points. Too many people who belonged there for reasons no one would question. Cross spoke low as they walked. "Halverson is in West Wing Room 12. Glass wall, easy visibility." Ellie's eyes tracked vents in the ceiling supply closets, the emergency stairwell door at the end of the corridor, the elevator bank that opened directly into the wing. She saw the problem as a map. She stopped at the nurse's station and looked at the charge nurse, a woman with tired eyes and steady hands. Lila Vargas. Lila's gaze flicked to Clay, then to Cross, then landed on Ellie with recognition. "You," Lila said softly. Not a question. Ellie nodded. Lila's eyes sharpened. "He's stable," she said, reading Ellie's face. "For now." Ellie's gaze moved to the ICU doors. 2 suited men stood near the entrance, hands clasped, scanning. Federal. Probably Cross's. Ellie looked at Clay. "I need floor plans." Clay's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Cross as if seeking permission to speak. Cross nodded once. Clay swallowed. "Maintenance has blueprints." Ellie did not wait. "Get them." Clay hesitated. The old Clay would have demanded why. The new Clay moved. He turned and spoke to Lila. "Call maintenance. Now." Lila did not move immediately. Her eyes stayed on Ellie. Ellie leaned slightly closer. "I'm not here to take your floor," she said. "I'm here to keep it from becoming a crime scene." Lila's throat bobbed. Then she nodded once and grabbed the phone. Ellie turned toward the staff moving through the ICU. She watched how they moved, who looked up when a monitor chirped, who froze when a cart clattered, who kept their hands steady. Her eyes landed on Nolan Park at the far end of the station. He stood near a computer terminal, postured tense, trying to look useful without getting in the way. His hands were still. Ellie approached him. He startled slightly. "Miss Mercer." Ellie corrected him without heat. "Ellie." Nolan swallowed. "Ellie." Ellie looked at his hands. You shook in the OR. His face flushed. Yes. Ellie's voice stayed calm. You shook because you were afraid of making a mistake. Nolan's eyes dropped. Yes. Ellie nodded. That means you care. Caring makes you slow. Slow makes you careful. I can use careful. Nolan blinked. Use me for what? Ellie pointed to the monitor station nearest Halverson's room. You watch his vitals. If his heart rate jumps 5 beats, you say clear. Loud. You do not hesitate. Nolan swallowed hard. Clear. Ellie nodded once. Good. Maintenance arrived with a rolled blueprint. Ellie spread it across the counter at the nurse's station, holding the edges flat with her palms. She studied it like a battlefield map. Clay stood beside her, restless and pale eyes, darting down the corridor toward the senator's room. Cross stood behind them, silent. Ellie traced a finger along the hall. Elevators, stairs, ventilation intakes. Clay pointed weakly. Main intake is on the roof, secondary intake in the basement. Ellie looked at Cross's men. Cover them. Sensors and eyes. If someone wants to move something through air, that is where it enters. One of the suited men nodded into his mic and stepped away. Ellie looked at the ceiling again. These vents feed what? Clay cleared his throat. West Wing shares a return with the adjacent supply corridor. Ellie's gaze narrowed. Shut that return, or filter it, now. Clay stared. We cannot just shut ICU ventilation. Ellie looked at him. You can if the alternative is breathing something you cannot treat. Clay's mouth opened, closed. He nodded stiffly and moved toward the phone. Ellie turned to Lila. Clear West Wing. Move other patients to east. Lila's eyes widened. Ellie, we cannot move critical patients. Ellie's gaze softened a fraction, not warm, just human. You can move the stable ones. We make a corridor. We give him space and we reduce traffic. Lila's jaw tightened. I will do what I can. Ellie nodded. Do it. She walked to Senator Halverson's room. The glass wall made the room visible from the corridor, a design meant for constant monitoring. It also made it a display case. Halverson lay in the bed, ventilator tubing rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His face was pale, but his eyes were open. Sharp. Watching. Ellie stepped inside. A federal agent stood near the door, posture rigid. Halverson turned his head slightly. His voice came out rough, thin from pain and oxygen. You. Ellie approached the bed and checked the chest tube drainage without rushing. She kept her hand steady on purpose, letting him see control. You should be sedated, Ellie said. Halverson's mouth twitched. They tried. Ellie met his eyes. Why are you awake? Because I wanted to make sure you were real, he said. Ellie did not respond to that. Halverson swallowed, grimacing. They are coming. Ellie's gaze stayed on his face. Who? Halverson's eyes shifted to the glass wall, then back. Not amateurs. Ellie nodded once. Tell me what you remember. Halverson breathed carefully. The driver. Before impact, he was on the phone. He said the doctor is ready to receive the package. Ellie's body went still. Her face did not change, but something behind her eyes tightened. The doctor, Ellie repeated. Halverson nodded faintly. I heard it, clear. Ellie looked through the glass wall toward the nurse's station. Clay stood there hunched over a phone, now speaking quickly, his hand half covering his mouth as if secrets could be contained by fingers. His face was tense, damp with sweat. He looked like a man under pressure. Ellie had seen men under pressure. She had also seen men performing it. Ellie's gaze stayed on Clay for a long second, then she turned back to the senator. Rest, Ellie said. Do not talk unless you have to. Halvorson's eyes narrowed. You do not trust your doctor. Ellie's voice stayed calm. I trust what I can verify. She adjusted the sheet, then stepped toward the window. She reached into a supply drawer and pulled out tape. She walked to the glass wall and taped a clean sheet across the interior window. The agent blinked. What are you doing? Ellie did not look at him. Silhouettes make targets. She returned to the bed and checked the IV line, then stepped out of the room. In the corridor, she paused. She listened. The ICU was quiet, but quiet in a hospital was never empty. There were always small sounds. Wheels, footsteps, the soft hiss of oxygen. Ellie heard the stairwell door at the far end shift slightly, the pressure change as someone moved through it. She looked toward it. Nothing visible. She turned back toward the nurse's station. Clay ended his call. He noticed Ellie watching and forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Everything secure," he said. Ellie walked toward him at an even pace. Not rushed, not casual. A pace that gave no warning. "Almost," Ellie said. Clay's smile tightened. "Good." Ellie stopped 2 feet from him, her gaze dropped. Clay's right hand moved slightly toward his coat pocket. Ellie lifted her eyes back to his. "Where is your phone?" Ellie asked. Clay blinked. "What?" "Your phone." Ellie repeated, voice still mild. "The one you used in my office." Clay's jaw clenched. "I am coordinating resources." Ellie nodded slowly. "Show me." Clay's eyes flicked to Cross, who stood farther down the corridor watching like she was waiting for a signal. Clay's throat bobbed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his personal phone. Ellie did not touch it. She just looked at it. "That one," Ellie said. Clay's face tightened. "Yes." Ellie's gaze stayed steady. "And the other one." Clay went still. In that stillness, Ellie could almost hear the click of gears inside him, calculation catching up to panic. Lila's voice rose from the nurse's station as she spoke into a phone, moving patients, shifting staff. Nolan's voice answered a nurse's question with a tremor he tried to hide. The ICU kept functioning around them, unaware of the thin wire tightening. Clay forced a laugh that sounded wrong in the quiet hallway. "There is no other phone," he said. Ellie held his gaze without blinking. "Then you will not mind if I check your pockets," Ellie said. Clay's smile cracked. His eyes flicked past Ellie toward the senator's room, then toward the stairwell, then back to Ellie's face. Ellie watched him make those decisions in real time. Cross's voice carried down the corridor, calm but sharp. "Dr. Clay." Clay did not look at her. Ellie's hand rose slowly, palm open, not threatening, just inevitable. "Hands," Ellie said. Clay's breathing changed. He lifted his hands, halfway hesitating at the level of surrender. Ellie's eyes stayed on his face. "Higher," she said. Clay raised his hands another inch, then stopped, as if the air had turned thick. His eyes were bright with sweat and calculation. He did not look like a man being searched. He looked like a man stalling for time. Ellie kept her voice gentle, almost conversational. "Slow," she said, "no sudden moves." Clay's lips parted. A thin laugh escaped him, brittle. "You are enjoying this," he said. Ellie's gaze did not leave his face. "I am watching you." Behind Ellie, the ICU kept breathing. A monitor chimed softly. A nurse's shoes squeaked once on polished tile. Somewhere farther down the hall, a family murmured prayers over a door that would not answer. Cross stood at the far end of the nurse's station, still as a statue. One of her suited men had drifted closer, hand near his jacket, eyes fixed on Clay. Clay noticed. He shifted his weight slightly, just enough to set Ellie's instincts humming. Ellie's hand remained open, palm up, the shape of patience. "Turn," Ellie said. "Face the counter." Clay hesitated. His throat moved as he swallowed. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, voice lower. Ellie's eyes stayed steady. "I know what you are doing." Clay's smile twitched. "You think you do." He began to turn, as if obeying shoulders angling toward the counter. His left hand stayed raised. His right hand dipped just a fraction, as if gravity had caught it. Ellie saw the movement before it finished. She stepped in closing distance, her own hand rising to intercept his wrist. Clay moved faster than he looked capable of. His right hand snapped down, not toward his phone, not toward his pocket, but toward the nearest human body. Lila Vargas was standing 2 steps away, holding a clipboard, eyes on Ellie. Clay lunged and hooked his arm around her neck, yanking her backward against his chest. The clipboard clattered to the floor. Lila sucked in a sharp breath, eyes widening. In the same motion, Clay's left hand vanished into his waistband and came up with a compact pistol, dark and matte, fitted with a suppressor that made it look unreal in the bright hospital light. He pressed the muzzle against Lila's temple. The ICU corridor froze. A nurse screamed. Nolan Park's face went white. He lifted his hands instinctively, palms out as if he could stop a bullet with skin. Cross's suited man drew his weapon, but his angle was wrong and he knew it. The moment he fired, he would hit Lila first. Clay's voice cracked as he shouted loud enough to drown the beeping monitors. Back up. His breath hit Lila's ear. His grip tightened. Lila's feet slid on the tile, her body half supported by his arm. She shook, fighting not to panic. Ellie did not move. Her gaze stayed locked on Clay's eyes. "Let her go," Ellie said. Clay's nostrils flared. The calm mask he wore all day was gone. Something raw and desperate had taken its place. "You are smart," Clay said, and his voice trembled with anger that sounded almost like fear. "Too smart. I knew it the moment I saw that empty resume. Nobody is that empty." Ellie's voice remained level. "You are not going to let me in." Clay's lips pulled back. "I did not want a witness." Cross's voice carried down the corridor, sharp and controlled. "Dr. Clay, put the weapon down." Clay laughed a harsh sound. "Director Cross, the famous name. Tell me something. Is she yours, or is she just your problem now?" Cross did not answer him. She did not negotiate with an ego. Her eyes stayed on his hands. Clay's grip on Lila tightened. Lila whimpered, and the sound cut through the corridor like a scalpel. Ellie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Clay noticed. His eyes brightened with the first hint of leverage. "I am leaving with the senator," Clay said. "You are going to bring him out. You are going to disconnect his monitors and wheel him down to the service elevator." Ellie's voice stayed calm. "That elevator's down." Clay's muzzle pressed harder. Lila's eyes squeezed shut. "Then you will carry him," Clay snarled. "You will make it work." Ellie took a slow breath and stepped one pace closer. Cross's man shifted, trying to find an angle. Cross lifted a hand, slightly stopping him. She understood what Ellie was doing. She let Ellie work. Ellie spoke softly, almost like she was talking to a patient in shock. "Everett," she said. Clay flinched at his first name. "Do not call me that." Ellie's gaze stayed on his. "You are not a killer." Clay's laugh was jagged. "You do not know what I am." "You fix things," Ellie said. "You do not break them. You cannot even admit you were wrong without choking on it." Clay's face twisted. "I have debts." "You have a handler," Ellie said. "You have a promise you made to someone who does not care if you live." Clay's eyes darted for 1 second toward Cross, toward the suited men, toward the cameras in the ceiling. Ellie watched his pupils flicker. She heard his breath hitch. "Look at me," Ellie said. Clay's gaze snapped back to her. Ellie's voice dropped low and steady, the tone that slowed panic in wounded soldiers when the world was loud and red. "I can help you," she said. "But you have to let her go." Clay's jaw clenched. "No." Ellie took another slow step forward. Her hands stayed low, visible. "Non-threatening." "Everett," Ellie said again, and this time it sounded like a diagnosis. "They will kill you. You know that. You are already a loose end." Clay's eyes flashed. "Shut up." Ellie did not raise her voice. "You failed. The senator lived. Federal is inside your building. You cannot outrun that." Clay's breath became ragged. The gun trembled slightly against Lila's temple. Ellie noticed. She filed it away. Not pity, not sympathy. Information. "You want to live," Ellie said. "That is your only honest desire right now." Clay's lips pulled tight. He did not deny it. Ellie tilted her head slightly as if offering a choice. "I am the only person in this hallway who can get you out alive," she said. "The agents behind me have orders you will never hear. The moment you slip, they will fire. I am the only one who can stop that." Clay's eyes flicked again fast toward Cross's man's weapon. That half-second was all Ellie needed. She did not shoot. Lila was too close. Ellie's hand snapped to the metal IV pole beside the nurse's station, the one holding a bag of saline that swayed gently with the building's air currents. In one blur, Ellie kicked the base. The pole swung like a pendulum. The heavy saline bag at the top whipped around in a clean arc and slammed into Clay's face. The impact made a wet crunch sound. Clay's head snapped back. His grip loosened for a fraction. The pistol shifted away from Lila's temple. Lila dropped, stumbling forward, gasping. Ellie moved. She drove her shoulder into Clay's chest with controlled force, knocking him off balance. Clay hit the counter hard, the pistol hand flailing. Ellie's fingers locked around his wrist. She twisted. The snap was audible. Clay screamed pain, ripping the air open. The pistol fell and clattered across the tile. Cross's suited men surged forward, weapons raised, moving like a single organism. Ellie swept Clay's legs out. He slammed down, breath knocked out of him. Ellie dropped a knee onto his upper chest and pinned him, her forearm across his throat, not crushing, just controlling. She leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Do no harm," Ellie whispered, "unless necessary." Clay's face was already swelling. Blood dripped from his nose onto the floor. "You are insane," he rasped. Ellie's eyes did not blink. "You are under arrest." Cross's men cuffed him quickly, snapping restraints tight. One dragged him backward, away from the nurse's station, away from Lila, away from any leverage. Lila sat on the floor, shaking hands pressed to her neck. Tears streaked down her cheeks. She tried to breathe and could not find the rhythm. Ellie crouched beside her, voice softer now. "Look at me," Ellie said. Lila's eyes met Ellie's, and Ellie said, "Out." Lila inhaled shakily. Again, Ellie said. Lila inhaled again, a little steadier. Ellie nodded once. "Good, you're alive. Stay sitting. Do not stand until your legs stop shaking." Lila swallowed, voice barely present. He had a gun. Ellie's gaze flicked to the weapon on the floor, then to the biohazard sharps container by the station. "What did he throw away?" Ellie asked. Lila blinked, confused. "What?" Ellie stood. She looked into the sharps container. Beneath used needles and bloody gauze sat a dark rectangle wrapped in a plastic sleeve. A burner phone. Ellie stared at it for 1 second, then looked up the corridor toward Halverson's room. Her mind did not celebrate. It narrowed. Cross stepped closer. Her expression unchanged, but her eyes sharp. "You were right," Cross said. Ellie nodded once. He was the door. Cross's gaze moved to the stairwell at the end of the hall. "Is it over?" Ellie's eyes stayed on the far end of the corridor, listening to sounds no one else noticed. "No," Ellie said quietly. Cross's mouth tightened. "Why?" Ellie's gaze lowered to Clay as he was dragged away, still screaming, still cursing, still alive. "They do not send a team like that for one door," Ellie said. "They send a team for an outcome." A soft flicker ran through the ceiling lights. Then another. A nurse looked up, alarmed. "What is that?" The lights went out. Complete darkness for half a second. Then the emergency strips along the floor and ceiling kicked in, bathing the ICU corridor in dim red. The world turned the color of blood. Monitors continued beeping, some switching to battery backup with urgent tones. Families in nearby rooms cried out. Staff voices rose tense and confused. The intercom crackled. A distorted voice came through, flat and synthetic, as if spoken by a machine that had learned language but not emotion. "Dr. Everett Clay has failed." Ellie's spine went rigid. "Initiate Protocol Omega." The intercom clicked off. For a moment, the only sound was the beeping of machines and the distant growing thunder of boots on stairs. Heavy, many. Cross's suited men turned toward the stairwell doors, weapons raised. Ellie looked at Nolan Park. Nolan stood, frozen hands hovering near the crash cart like he did not know what it could be. Ellie's voice cut through his paralysis. "Nolan," she said. His eyes snapped to her. "Breathe," Ellie said, "then move." Nolan swallowed. "Move where?" Ellie pointed down the corridor toward the east stairwell door. "They are coming from there," Ellie said. A deep boom echoed through the stairwell, a metallic vibration that traveled through walls. Not a kick, a charge. Cross's voice was clipped. Teams on elevators. Her suited men shifted, one moving toward the elevator bank, another toward the west stairwell. Ellie stepped into the center of the corridor, red light painting her scrubs dark. She looked smaller in the oversized fabric, but her presence was not small. "We do not fight them straight," Ellie said. One of Cross's men frowned. "Ma'am, we have weapons." Ellie looked at him. "They have night vision. You have red lights and panic." The man's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Ellie turned to Nolan. "Bring the crash cart, now." Nolan grabbed the cart hands, shaking. "Stop," Ellie snapped. Nolan froze. Ellie moved closer, voice low. "Tremors ruin your aim." "I do not have a gun," Nolan whispered. Ellie leaned in, eyes hard. "You have pressurized oxygen and chemicals and a cart built to restart hearts. Use your brain." Nolan's throat bobbed. He nodded once. Ellie looked at Lila, still on the floor, trying to steady her breathing. "Lila," Ellie said. Lila looked up. "Get your staff into rooms." Doors closed. "No one in the hall unless I say," Ellie ordered. Lila swallowed and forced herself to stand, legs trembling. "Yes." Ellie turned toward a supply closet. "Alcohol, hand sanitizer, anything that burns." A nurse blinked. "Why?" Ellie's voice stayed cold. "Because they see in the dark. We make the dark hurt." Cross's men moved, retrieving bottles of surgical alcohol and sanitizer, their hands quick. Ellie took one bottle and twisted the cap off. The smell hit immediately, sharp and medicinal. She poured it along the floor in a long, slick line across the corridor from wall to wall, creating a shallow pool that reflected the red emergency lights. Another agent did the same with sanitizer, thicker, sticky, spreading like oil. Ellie's eyes flicked to the emergency equipment cabinet. A flare gun sat inside, meant for signaling during evacuation. She yanked the cabinet open and grabbed it. Nolan stared. "What are you doing?" Ellie did not answer. She did not explain. She did not waste words. The east stairwell door echoed inward. A deafening crack. Smoke rolled out. 4 figures emerged, black tactical gear, gas masks, quad lens, night vision goggles glowing faintly. They moved in a tight stack, disciplined, weapons up, stepping in synchronized rhythm. Not street criminals. Professionals. One of Cross's men fired 2 controlled shots. The lead intruder took rounds to the chest plate and did not flinch. He returned fire with a suppressed weapon, muzzle flashes barely visible in the red light. Cross's man staggered around and biting into his shoulder. He fell, grunting, clutching his arm. The intruders advanced. Ellie stepped into shadow beside a wall flare gun in hand. She waited until their boots hit the alcohol slick. The lead intruder's head dipped slightly, recognizing the trap too late. He spoke through the mask, voice distorted. "Fire." Ellie raised the flare gun and fired. The magnesium slug hissed through the dim corridor and struck the slick floor. The alcohol ignited instantly. A wall of flame erupted, blue and orange, roaring up between the intruders and the ICU doors. The sudden brightness overloaded their night vision goggles, turning their world into white glare. They jerked back, hands rising instinctively toward their faces. Ellie's voice snapped. "Now." Nolan shoved the crash cart forward. The cart rolled fast, wheels rattling straight toward the cluster of blinded intruders. Ellie stepped out, pistol in her hand, now the one Cross had issued her earlier, and fired once. Not at a man. At the oxygen cylinder strapped to the cart. The bullet struck the valve. The tank turned into a missile. Pressurized gas exploded out, spinning the cylinder violently. It slammed into an intruder's legs with a brutal metallic thud. He went down hard. The cylinder ricocheted and smashed into another, sending him sprawling. The corridor filled with shouted commands, muffled through masks confused by flame and glare. The leader ripped off his goggles, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness. He pointed toward the flames. "Target room, go." He vaulted over the fire line with an athletic burst, landing on the other side and sprinting toward Halverson's room. Ellie moved to intercept. A massive intruder stepped into her path, drawing a combat knife blade, catching the red light. He lunged. Ellie did not retreat. She stepped into his space, taking the slash to her left forearm, a hot line of pain that opened skin. She used the moment to close distance and drive the heel of her palm into his chin. His head snapped back. Ellie's right hand flashed to her pocket and came out with trauma shears. She hooked the shears into the gap at the side of his neck armor and twisted. The intruder made a strangled sound and dropped, body collapsing heavy onto the tile. Ellie did not stop to watch him fall. She ran. Blood slid down her forearm, warm and steady. The leader was already at Halverson's door. He kicked it open. Inside, the senator had tried to sit up, one hand gripping a scalpel he had somehow acquired from a tray. His eyes were wide pain and fear mixing with stubborn pride. The leader raised his pistol. And, he said, voice distorted, "Nah." Ellie hit him from behind. She drove her shoulder into his spine, slamming him into the ventilator unit beside the bed. The machine toppled, tubing ripping loose, alarms screaming. They crashed to the floor. The leader rolled strong, trained. He threw Ellie off with a violent shove. Ellie slammed into the wall, vision flashing white for half a second. Her injured arm screamed. The leader stood breathing hard, pistol steady now. He aimed at her head. "You are good," he grunted. "But you are just a nurse." Ellie's mouth tasted like copper. She forced herself upright, eyes tracking the room. Saline, spilled from a knocked-over IV bag pooling on the floor near the leader's boots, shimmering under emergency lights. A power cable from the ventilator lay snapped, exposed copper wires humming faintly with battery current. Ellie's hand reached for it. The leader saw the movement and tightened his grip on the pistol. Ellie spoke through clenched teeth. "I am not just a nurse." She grabbed the live cable. Pain flickered up her fingers, a sharp bite, but she held it anyway. She jammed the exposed wires into the saline puddle. Blue electricity arced through the liquid. The leader convulsed, instantly, muscles locking. His pistol fired wildly into the ceiling rounds, punching holes into tiles. Then his body collapsed, twitching once, then still. Ellie dropped the cable and fell back against the wall, panting. Her rubber-soled clogs had insulated her enough to keep her from joining him. Halvorsen stared at the body on the floor chest, rising fast. Ellie forced herself to move. She stumbled to the senator's bedside and checked the ventilator tubing, hands working through pain. "Stay down," she said, voice ragged. "Do not move." Halvorsen swallowed hard. "You are bleeding." Ellie glanced at her arm. Blood soaked her sleeve. She pressed gauze from a nearby tray against the wound without looking away from the door. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Cross's voice shouted commands. Then the overhead lights snapped back on as the generators regained full power. Bright white light flooded the room, washing the red away. The door burst open. Cross entered with a SWAT team, weapons raised, followed by two of her suited men. Their eyes swept the room, then landed on the leader's body, and Ellie against the wall, breathing hard blood on her scrubs. Cross's gaze went to Halvorsen. Status. Ellie pushed herself upright, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Vitals stable," Ellie said. "Visitors' hours are over." A flicker of something like approval crossed Cross's face, gone as quickly as it came. "Well done," Cross said. "Seraph." Ellie shook her head once. "Ellie." Cross held her gaze for a beat, then nodded slightly as if accepting the correction. Nolan appeared in the doorway behind the SWAT team, face pale, eyes wide. He looked at Ellie's bleeding arm, then at the burned-out intruder, then at the senator. His lips moved without sound. Ellie looked at him. "You did good," she said. Nolan blinked hard, like he did not know how to receive that. Outside the room, the corridor was a wreck. Smoke marks on walls. A crash cart tipped on its side. A small patch of scorched tile where alcohol had burned. An agent sat against the wall, clutching his shoulder teeth gritted while a nurse wrapped his arm with gauze. Lila stood near the nurse's station, face streaked with tears, hands still shaking but working. She met Ellie's gaze and nodded once, a silent thank you that carried weight. SWAT moved through the floor, clearing rooms, securing stairwells, voices sharp and controlled. Clay was nowhere in sight now, dragged away by federal hands. Cross stepped closer to Ellie. Her voice lowered. "This floor is secured," Cross said. Ellie's eyes stayed on the hallway. For now. Cross glanced at Ellie's arm. "Medical." Ellie exhaled. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a heavy ache behind her eyes. "I need gauze," Ellie said. "And a tetanus shot." Cross almost smiled. Almost. She turned to one of her men. "Get her treated, then bring her to the admin corridor." Ellie started to protest, but her legs wobbled. She caught herself on the bed rail, stubbornly refusing to fall. Halvorsen watched her voice rough. "You saved me again." Ellie looked at him, expression tight. "You were in the way," she said. Halvorsen's mouth twitched. "You were always like this." Ellie's eyes narrowed. "You do not know me." Halvorsen's gaze held hers. "I know what you did. I know what it costs." Ellie looked away first. A nurse cleaned Ellie's forearm, quickly wrapping it tight. The cut was deep, but not fatal. Ellie did not flinch as the antiseptic burned. In the bright light of the ICU, she looked like what she had tried to become. A tired nurse in oversized scrubs with a bandaged arm. Just another hospital story. But the floor tiles still smelled faintly of burned alcohol, and the holes in the ceiling above Halverson's bed told a different truth. Cross led Ellie down the administrative corridor upstairs away from ICU noise. The building felt quieter now, but not calm. A hospital after a breach was like a body after trauma. Alive but watchful. Tender everywhere. They entered a small conference room that had been converted into a temporary command space. Laptops, radios, maps on a table. A few agents murmured into headsets. The air smelled like coffee and stress. Cross closed the door behind them. Ellie stood near the wall, refusing the chair. Her bandaged arm throbbed. Cross studied her for a long moment. "You could have stayed in that diner," Cross said. Ellie's eyes stayed on the table. "I tried." Cross nodded once, and yet. Ellie lifted her gaze. "Your people tracked me." Cross did not deny it. "I watched the application go in. I watched it get rejected. I watched the crash happen. I watched you run toward fire." Ellie's jaw tightened. "You let me." Cross's voice stayed calm. "You chose." Ellie stepped closer to the table, close enough to see the papers laid out. One document sat on top, crisp official covered in signatures. Cross slid it toward her. Ellie read it slowly this time. License reinstatement. Service credit. A real identity no longer erased by classified silence. Ellie's throat tightened unexpectedly. She did not reach for the paper. "You can sign it," Cross said. "Or you can walk out and go back to counting intersections." Ellie's gaze remained hard. "If I sign, you call me again." Cross nodded. "If you sign, I have a number that answers." Ellie's hand flexed. "I told you I am done." Cross leaned forward slightly. "Then be done after you have sleep. Be done after you have a day without smoke. Be done after you are not the only thing standing between a senator and a weaponized disease." Ellie's eyes sharpened. Chimera is still missing. Cross's mouth tightened. "Yes." Ellie's gaze dropped to the floor for half a second, then returned. "So this is not over." Cross did not respond with promises. She did not give Ellie a future. She offered only facts. "Tonight you kept him alive," Cross said. "Tonight you kept the hospital standing." Ellie's voice was low. "Tonight you almost lost control." Cross held her gaze. "Tonight you had it." Ellie stared at the document again. Her mind flashed to Clay's face as he held Lila like a shield. To the leader's eyes behind night vision. To the word Omega on the intercom. Ellie's fingers reached out and took the pen. She signed. The ink looked too ordinary for what it meant. Cross took the document back, slid it into a folder, and nodded once. "You will get your license," Cross said. Quietly. Ellie's mouth tightened. "No, not quietly. I want it clean and public. I want my name to exist." Cross studied her, then nodded again slower. "Understood." Ellie exhaled, and for the first time since morning, the breath felt like it belonged to her. Outside the conference room, the hospital's overhead paging announced a return to normal operations, as if normal could be summoned by voice. Ellie walked back toward the ICU to check on staff because she could not stop herself. Lila stood at the station directing nurses with a steadier voice now. Nolan hovered nearby, eyes bloodshot, still running on adrenaline and disbelief. Ellie approached Lila. Lila's eyes filled again, but she kept them from spilling. "You saved me," she said. Ellie nodded once. "You held yourself together. That mattered." Lila swallowed. "I thought I was going to die." Ellie's voice softened slightly. "I know." Lila's hands trembled again. Ellie placed her uninjured hand on Lila's wrist, grounding her. "Drink water," Ellie said. "Eat something. Sit for 5 minutes before your body decides for you." Lila nodded, grateful and exhausted. Ellie turned to Nolan. Nolan spoke first voice, quiet. "I pushed the cart." Ellie looked at him. You did. Nolan swallowed. I was terrified. Ellie nodded. You did it anyway. Nolan's eyes glistened. He blinked hard, forcing himself not to break in the middle of ICU. Ellie stepped back, gaze moving to Halverson's room behind the taped sheet. The senator lay quiet now, sedated at last, guarded by SWAT and federal men who did not look away from doors. Ellie felt the weight in her arm, the ache in her bones. The exhaustion that came after violence when the body remembered it was human. Cross approached from behind, voice low. We have a car ready. Ellie did not turn. To take me where? Cross paused. Home, wherever you are calling home. Ellie's mouth tightened. I do not know what that is. Cross did not respond with comfort. She did not offer softness. She simply stood beside Ellie, looking through the glass at the quiet room. Ellie stared at the taped sheet, the crude barrier that had saved lives by removing silhouettes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the disguised app icon lighting her screen. A message appeared. Unknown, contact you, okay. Ellie stared at it. For a second, her throat tightened again, not with fear, but with the strange ache of being seen. She typed back with her uninjured hand. Alive. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. Cross watched her. You still want quiet. Ellie's eyes stayed on the ICU door. I want sleep. Cross nodded. You will get it. Ellie finally turned away from the senator's room and walked down the corridor. Staff moved around her, returning to routine, stepping over scorch marks and broken equipment that would be cleaned by morning. At the elevator, Ellie glanced at her reflection in the polished steel door. Bandaged arm. Scrubs too big. Hair pulled tight. Eyes that looked older than her age. She looked like nothing special. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Ellie stepped inside and let the doors close, sealing her in a brief pocket of silence. Her breath came out slow. Not relief. Not victory. Just a moment where the noise in her head lowered enough for her to feel the weight of her own name again.